Hi everyone, hope you're keeping well. It's a lovely day here today, here in Cornwall, UK. What's the date? 23rd of April 2026. Sun shining, lots of people are out. That's those that aren't at work, obviously. So yes, I thought I'd make a video today around the topic of digital freelancing. Now, I do try and make the videos different, rather than just talking about the same topic all the time. So I thought this would be a good one for today. For those of you who live in the UK, like I do, you will know, not just the UK, but also places like India and, many other countries, but specifically the UK, because obviously I'm based in the UK. It's a British channel. I have a lot of UK subscribers. And what's happening is a lot of the employers who are recruiting for marketing roles are now recruiting freelancers. There's different reasons for this, the state of the UK economy, and also the fact that last year, new legislation was brought in, which meant that I don't know if legislation is the right word, but new rules were brought in. That's a better word, better choice word. New rules were brought in requiring employers to pay a higher rate of national insurance on PAYE. That's pay as you earn employees. So all these things combined, a lot of employers are putting jobs out there on a kind of freelance basis, and there's different creative words and terms that are used, like sales partner, and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day it's freelance, and the salaries are normally sort of quite high, which is always a bit of a red flag in my book, because you rarely see jobs for 100 grand or 150 grand or 200 grand, and something's wrong as soon as you see that, because most jobs don't pay that. I mean, the Prime Minister of the UK doesn't even get 200 grand a year, so that's a red flag. So look, it's no secret that this is happening. Employers are trying to put a lot of a risk onto contractors who are willing to work on a kind of fractional basis, self-employed basis, digital freelancing basis. So it is becoming the norm, especially in marketing. But in the UK we have something termed the gig economy. So that is basically people who pay their own tax and national insurance. And there's different sectors, like delivery drivers and stuff. But specifically in digital marketing and people who work kind of remotely or on a hybrid basis, there's a lot of these jobs around, and it could be like a 0 hours contract, a freelance contract, a temporary contract, a see how it goes contract, and you don't have the same security as a PAYE job, basically. So you don't get your holiday pay, and you can be kind of, I don't know if dismissed is the right word, but you can be terminated a bit earlier with a lot of these kind of freelance contracts. Like my old boss said to me, every contract, even if you're getting paid 40 grand a year, every contract can be ended technically. But there's ways to end these things. But when you're working as a digital freelancer, you have got a bit less security, unless you've been there a very, very long time. So look, to cut to the chase with this, as usual, I've got a bit of stuff in front of me, but I'm not reading exclusively off the screen. But a lot of these kind of opportunities for digital freelancers are, they're set up in a way that's designed to make you fail. It's a horrible thing to say. And the reason for that comes down to the business model, because if these companies had a rock solid business model, which was making money year on year, then it wouldn't be freelance, it'd be growing the company and recruiting people in-house. So the fact that they are recruiting freelance normally means that things are a bit shaky, or it's not enough money to pay like a full-time salary. So they want somebody perhaps using a domain email address, and I'll print some business cards for you, but you're not really on the books. You're just like a kind of I don't know if puppet is a polite word, but you basically like a puppet figure within their organization. So look, the problem is there's different ways of terming this, but there's no kind of proven business model, no proven offer. These are things to look out for when you see these adverts, on sites like Indeed.com. There's loads of other job sites as well, but that's one of the main ones. There's no validated demand for the product or the service they're offering. That's one thing I always do. I always look into, I look at search on Google, search on Perplexity, search on Claude, search on Gemini, different platforms, and I just do a bit of my own market research, and I think, well, is this product going to fly? Are people going to buy it? Is there demand for it? And normally, Google AI search is quite good. That'll give you quite a well-grounded answer, and it'll pull stuff from different sources. Normally, if not always, but normally, if a business is recruiting for somebody freelance or on a very kind of casual, transient basis, it normally means there's like a weak marketing strategy. One of the things to watch out for, guys, is a lot of these kind of I don't want to kind of pick on the founders, but a lot of these small businesses and stuff, they will recruit people on a freelance basis, and they will control the marketing strategy. So they'll take somebody on a freelance basis, so if you take it on, you're kind of shouldering the risk, and they're basically firing shots saying, I want things done this way, or I want somebody who's an expert in meta ads, or somebody who's an expert in Google ads. But you see, I've said this before, if the business model's not right, whatever you throw at it, no matter how good you are, whatever degrees you've got, a master's degree, if somebody else is making calling the shots with the marketing strategy and the business model's not right, you're destined to fail, guys and girls. Horrible thing to say, but it's very true. Another thing to watch out for is the unrealistic expectations. So it's very common, where somebody will try and recruit somebody on a freelance basis, and I had one a couple of months ago. I won't say which company. Basically, on the first call, they were talking about, getting, they weren't even making 200 grand, but they were talking about, getting up to 200k, 300k within, 3 to 6 months using like meta ads. And, when I did the research and I looked on IndulgeSuite, which is like the company records, and when I looked at the SEO signals for the website and looked at the social media, it was very clear that they were a long way off making that kind of money. And I did some research into their competitors, and I saw and found that there are a lot of competitors who are a lot more established than them. So that's something to look out for, unrealistic expectations. Again, it's very common. People will try and hoodwink you and tell you what they want you to believe, and it's down to you to kind of do your own due diligence and market research just to find out whether they're telling the truth. It's a horrible thing to say, but like all businesses, when people are trying to sell you something, whether it's trying to sell you a job opportunity or sell you a product or services, people will put spin on stuff. It definitely happens. So look, most freelancers don't fail because they're bad. They fail because, as I said, the business model's broken. So selling something nobody wants. No lead flow. In terms of leads and stuff. Founder guessing strategy. Again, I don't want to pick on founders because not all founders are, bad or whatever. I'm just talking generally, okay? So but sometimes you do find that, especially with the very small startup companies, where they've got a strategy where they're just literally trying to guess their way around and see what works. So maybe we'll do 1 month with a budget of meta ads, so Facebook, Instagram, etc., and then the next month they'll do like LinkedIn ads, and the next month they'll do Google ads, and they're like literally hopping around, jumping from stepping stone to stepping stone, just seeing what works. But the thing that works is the business model. All these marketing strategies, and I mention this in other videos, if you've got something that works, you can enhance it and increase the sales and the lead funnel and stuff, or sales funnel, same thing, more or less. Just running ads to scale it with, and having that kind of mindset, that doesn't work. Like I said, it all comes down to a business model. Think about it. What is the customer prepared to pay? Is the product or the service, or the software as a service, in demand? People are literally just trying to rehash stuff. Obviously you've all heard of software as a service. So maybe if it's like a travel company which wants to make their offering online, I call it traveling as a TAS, traveling as a service. So people are just constantly rehashing stuff, and very few business, I'll rephrase that, not very few, but very less businesses have a business model that actually makes real money, a lot of money, and on a massive scale. And there's much more businesses around which kind of just tick over, if that makes sense. People will always need stuff like food and clothes and DIY and things like plumbers, electricians, etc. But getting back to more marketing, a lot of these agencies, they have, as I just mentioned, have a kind of just run ads and to scale and let us take you to the next level mentality. But which marketing agencies actually look at the business model? And it's a bit of a grey area, because the people who started the company, like the directors, the founders, that's their responsibility to get that right, and once they do, then it can be scaled and stuff. So how to spot a bad opportunity. Now I've covered some of these already. Now, commission only, unlimited earning potentials, there's loads of those. If you look on Indeed, there's loads and loads of opportunities, and just the way it's worded, you can normally tell, it's got like a salary of like between 50 and 80 grand. It's kind of nonsense, because, even for a skilled marketing manager who's got a job on the books for a company in London, for example, most of his jobs don't sort of pay much more than sort of 40 to 60k. So when you see a job saying sort of 80 to 120k immediate start, it immediately raises red flags. Another thing to look out for: no proof of past sales. So obviously you'll know it's easy to put up a website now. I even have one myself, but you see, no matter how posh the website looks, and there's lots of solutions now where you can get a decent website even without a lot of money, thrown up within a day, maybe less than a day, in fact definitely less than a day. But you see, that online shop window is not proof of a valid business model or valid sales. So you always need to look for proof of past sales. Now, the way I do this is I find the company name. So let's just say, to make this up, so say for example, if the company name is, which it's not, but just say the company name is E&J United K Limited. What I'd then do is type in E&J United K Limited, little space, and I type ENDOLE, Endole, put that into Google, and it brings up public company records. And if there's nothing there, or if you can't find the company, not always, but it usually, I'm talking about limited companies here, it normally means they're not making money, or they're a sole trader, or something, or they might be a partnership or something, or a charity. But it's a good place to start. And if they're making all these kind of rash claims on the website that they're an award-winning this, that, or the other, and you run that Endole Suite check and you can't find any legitimate financial records, or if you look through their social media and you can't find any clear customers, blah blah blah, then that should raise red flags. So another red flag, and I mentioned this one already too, like where the founder controls the strategy but blames execution. Look, this happens a lot, guys. A lot of these job ads, UK, different countries, I won't pick on different countries, but it's a global problem. So they're setting the strategy and they're blaming the execution on the freelancer they recruit, which is absolute nonsense. There's very few roles actually where, I'd say very few, like, much less, so 20% and under, where the marketing person actually gets to set a marketing strategy and has complete end-to-end control of that strategy and the marketing budget. A lot of these freelance contracts, they take somebody on, they tell you what the wage is, they tell you their expectation on the first call, which is, ridiculous, stroke normal. Ridiculous in the sense that the expectations are often far-fetched. It's normal in the sense that that's what all these startups and founders want. But look, another thing to look out for is no traction. So, if you see a nice website and you look on the About Us page and you see lots of pretty pictures of a team, but you can't actually get hold of any of these people, or you suspect the photos aren't real, then that could be a red flag as well. as I said, this thing applies globally. You know, it's relevant for every country, to be honest. So what actually works? Strong freelance opportunities usually have proven products already selling. So, you know, I'm sure you'll agree, you know, there's got to be demand for the product or service. You know, it could be software, it could be a service, it could be a product, but it's got to be demand for it. And normally the products which sell well are the ones which have been around for a while. It's got to be clear demand for it, as I just touched on. An existing funnel or system. You see, with these kind of marketing roles, like, you know, if I can term the phrase, like, our job is to kind of improve and enhance what already works. You know, our job isn't to go in there and build everything from scratch, while you know, the founders playing around on Instagram and social media trying to, you know, portray themselves as some kind of entrepreneur, while, you know, somebody else doing all the hard work on a freelance basis. Yeah, that's nonsense, you know. Yeah, so if there's something that works, we like want to say what works legitimately. I'm not talking about a lot of followers, I'm talking about the business model. We can go in and we can polish things up and refine things with regard to automation and funnels and, you know, just general processes and AI marketing and stuff like that. But whether it's something that doesn't work, you know, it's very hard to go in there and make a success of it, because, you know, you got like the founder setting the strategy, and when that strategy is wrong, you know, they're quick to kind of point a finger and say, you know, you haven't executed it properly. But yeah, so you get the gist of it. High growth areas where you can stand out as a freelancer. Look, I know I've got a lot of followers across the UK and also in India and different countries like Indonesia, growing amount of subscribers in Philippines, United States, Spain, Italy, yeah, all over really, you know, even in Australia I've got some, you know, and the channel's growing quite nicely. I've got like 4,000 plus subscribers now, but I'm well aware that people live in different kind of regions of the world and speak different languages, and things are slightly different in different areas. But, you know, one thing that kind of, you know, is in demand is, you know, kind of AI integration. So if you can kind of, you know, become well grounded and train yourself in the different forms of AI. So now I'm not specifically talking about ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude or Gemini or anything like that, but there's hundreds of AI platforms, you know, that do different things. You know, I've got a list, I think I put it up in one of the other videos, and that's like 300 plus long, you know. So if you can become a bit of a AI expert in the different types of AI and, you know, what the AI does, and understand and learn how to manage it and be that bridge for different companies, then there's a great, you know, opportunity there. You know, automating workflows for businesses, you know, not just chatbots, but most businesses still don't know how to use AI properly, believe it or not. You know, they're just, you know, faffing around with some of the most common platforms. They haven't heard of, you know, different things like Pixis AI or whatever. So yeah. Okay, another thing, so, you know, funnel optimization. You know, a lot of businesses struggle with this, believe it or not. You know, so that's like the funnel. So I mentioned AIDA in the past, like awareness, you know, interest, desire, you know, yeah, AIDA, yeah, acquisition or whatever, yeah. So if the sales funnel is not, you know, working, so that is, you know, that's the process for think of it as a customer journey. So, you know, at the top of the funnel you got the, you know, the kind of awareness on social media, and the next stage down you got, you know, people who've seen those social media posts or the press releases or digital PR, and they become interested in products, and then you got you know, the decision. So, you know, yeah, so think of it as a funnel, sales funnel, and if that's not working, there's normally something wrong somewhere along that customer journey, and a lot of businesses, it all sounds a lot easier than it is. A lot of businesses struggle with that. So if you're trying to market your services to different businesses and different companies, regardless of whether you're in the UK, India, the United States, Australia, Spain, blah blah blah, you know, if you can kind of focus on fixing broken sales processes and where that kind of customer journey breaks, you know, maybe people click off a page because they find it boring, or they find the color of the website a bit off-putting or a bit too in your face, or, you know, just try and work on the kind of conversion rate optimization side of things. One of my last videos, CRO, I think it's 2 or 3 back, I at the bottom of the video in the description, I put some different sites which could help you with that as well. So maybe try and focus on that. Content systems, so not just editing, with content there's loads of it around, short form, long form. I do mainly long form, but truthfully, how many people, unless you're stuck in an office, and even those are stuck in an office are normally quite busy doing different things, got time to scroll through endless reams of content all day long, unless they get paid to do that. Probably not many. So maybe just work on content systems, so not just editing, but with different types of content and different types of templates and different types of effects and different storytelling angles and different brand messaging and stuff, because believe it or not, a lot of companies, and it's a very easy trap to fall into, if they've got somebody in the office doing the content for the social media, if they've been there a while, maybe 6 months or more, what tends to happen is things get a bit samey, because people operate within their own personality, within their own kind of boundary walls of their own knowledge, so to speak. So if they're doing the content for 6 months or 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, we start to run out of ideas, and every post starts to look and feel the same. So maybe look at jumbling things up, maybe having somebody else do the content for the next quarter, and somebody else do the content for the next quarter. Just try, it's good to have a fresh set of eyes, because things do get very samey, and that can put off the kind of customers you're trying to attract down into that sales funnel. So look at things like lead generation systems, like appointment setting. There's different ways to do it. It's still a big opportunity if you do it well. I mentioned Apollo.io. It's a good way to get lists of leads. You pay a small fee, but you can download the info. And I've spoken to a lot of companies who use that, and they've all kind of said that it's very good. So yeah, look, okay, I might put this in the description. Well, just one last bit, like from a UK specific angle, the things that are kind of, triggering this, increase in freelance working are rising costs. So taxes, hiring, compliance. There's a lot of compliance now on UK employers to, make sure everything's legit in terms of right to work, and depending on the type of role, whether they've done like a credit check, or whether they've checked somebody's quality. There's a lot of compliance. It depends on the role. There's a lot more freelance and contractor roles, but they're less secure, and I do think a lot of them have, not all of them, but a lot of them are quite often quite unrealistic, to be honest with you. Businesses try to stay lean. You can't blame them for doing that. They want to keep their cost base really lean and agile. So if they can have a team of freelancers, which they can hire and fire at a whim, that works for them. It might not work for you. It doesn't work for me. But the way around this, guys, is think about what I've been talking about with the business model. If you run a YouTube channel, I know many of my followers do on YouTube, some are a bit further ahead of me, some are a bit further behind me in terms of subscriber count and videos and experience and everything else. But just think about your offering. If you think about yourself, think about the business model. Think about what you're offering. Think about the country you're in. So whether you're in the UK, whether you're in India. If you're in the UK, are you trying to sell into the UK? Are you trying to sell abroad? If you're in India, are you trying to sell in a particular region of India, or are you trying to target people in the UK? Just see where I'm coming from, and just look at what's in demand there. Look at how you can, remold, reshape your channel, what you're offering, what the niche is, because there's a lot of people all trying to do the same thing. I'm just telling you the truth, guys. There's a lot of people all trying to do the same thing, and they're probably not going to succeed, to be honest. It's very easy to waste a lot of time making videos. I made one for a couple of weeks, but it's very easy to make videos every week, 2 a week, be putting them out, spending hours and hours, and not be seeing a return on investment. So just have a think about a business model, okay? Okay, so I'm going to wrap up the video there. I've talked for probably far too long already, as usual. A squeaky chair behind me again. Look, I hope you found it useful. I've tried to make it as interesting and relevant as possible. What I don't do with these videos is just talk about a load of blabber, you know. I like to talk about real scenarios, what's happening in the real world, in marketing, travel, tech and stuff. So yeah, this stuff definitely happens, and if you can navigate your way around it in a kind of structured, organized way, I think you'll have more success. But you've got to be on the ball, you've got to be looking ahead of a curve, and not trying to do what everybody else is doing. You've got to make yourself stand out and look at what you're offering. Okay, so take care. Thanks for watching, listening, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care. Bye.